Welcome to English Stories Journey. Listen, relax, and grow your English with every story. Jane Eyre was a poor orphan girl. Her parents had died when she was a baby, and she lived with her rich aunt, Mrs. Reed, in a large house called Gateshead Hall. But Mrs. Reed did not love her. She loved her own children, but she treated Jane like a stranger. Jane's three cousins were unkind. Eliza and Georgiana, the daughters, were proud and selfish, but the son, John Reed, was the worst. He was older and bigger than Jane. He liked to hurt her. He shouted at her, pulled her hair, and sometimes hit her. Jane was small and weak, but she was also brave. She tried to fight back, and that made Mrs. Reed even angrier. One afternoon, Jane was reading a book in peace. Suddenly, John entered the room. He took the book from her hands and threw it across the floor. "You have no right to read," he shouted. "This is my house, not yours." Jane could not stay silent. "You are cruel," she cried. "You are like a tyrant." John became furious. He hit her hard on the head. Jane screamed and ran at him in anger. The noise brought Mrs. Reed and the servants. They did not punish John. Instead, they blamed Jane. "You wicked, violent girl," her aunt said. "You must be locked in the Red Room." The Red Room was a cold, silent chamber at the far end of the house. It was the room where Mr. Reed, Jane's uncle, had died years before. Nobody liked to enter it. The servants believed it was haunted. Two servants dragged Jane there and shut the door. The room was big, with heavy curtains and dark furniture. The bed was tall and empty, with white sheets that looked ghostly in the shadows. Jane tried to be brave, but soon fear filled her heart. The afternoon light grew dim. Every sound seemed louder. The wind outside, the creak of the floor, the ticking of the clock. Jane thought about her dead uncle. She remembered how he had been kind to her. She wondered if his spirit was near. Suddenly, she thought she saw a light move across the wall. Was it a ghost? Her fear grew stronger. She screamed and pounded on the door. No one came. She cried and begged to be let out. At last, she fainted from terror. When Jane opened her eyes again, she was in her own bed. Bessie, the kind servant, was there. Beside her stood a gentleman doctor. He looked at Jane kindly and spoke gently to her. "This child is nervous and unhappy," he said. "She needs better care. Perhaps school would be good for her." Mrs. Reed agreed at once. She did not want Jane in her house anymore. A few weeks later, a tall, strict man came to Gateshead. He wore black clothes and had a thin, hard face. His name was Mr. Brocklehurst, headmaster of Lowood School for Girls. Mrs. Reed told him that Jane was wicked and a liar. Mr. Brocklehurst believed her without question. Jane listened in silence, though her heart burned with anger. She wanted to defend herself, but she knew her words would change nothing. Soon, Jane's journey began. One winter morning, Jane left Gateshead Hall. She climbed into a carriage with a small bag of clothes. She looked back once at the great house where she had suffered so much. She felt no love for it. The road was long and cold. The horses pulled the carriage through empty fields and dark woods. Jane was only 10 years old, small and alone, but inside she felt strong. She whispered to herself, "I am going to a new life. Perhaps I will find kindness there. Perhaps I will find freedom." And with that thought, Jane Eyre left her unhappy childhood behind and began her path toward the unknown future. Jane Eyre arrived at Lowood School on a cold winter morning. The building was large, gray, and old. Smoke came from tall chimneys, and the windows were small and icy. Jane felt nervous as she walked through the gates. She had never been so far from home. Inside, The girls were lined up in rows. They wore simple uniforms, plain and dark. Jane felt a little out of place. The teachers looked strict, and the students were silent. One of the teachers, a tall man named Mr. Brocklehurst, spoke to the girls with a loud, serious voice. "Girls," he said, "you must live a life of humility and obedience. Pride and vanity are sins. You must learn to work hard, be patient, and accept discipline." Jane listened carefully. She wanted to be good, but her heart felt sad. The rules were strict, and punishment was never far away. The first weeks were very hard. The girls had little food, and the rooms were cold. They wore thin clothes, even in winter. Jane sometimes shivered in the night. The students slept in long rows of beds with thin blankets. The teachers watched them closely. Any misbehavior or mistake could lead to punishment. Despite the harsh conditions, Jane met Helen Burns, a gentle and brave girl. Helen was calm and wise, even though she also suffered at Lowood. She had been at the school for many years and knew how to survive. Helen often comforted Jane and taught her to think calmly, even when life was unfair. One day, a cruel incident happened. Another student broke a rule, and the punishment was severe. Mr. Brocklehurst humiliated the girl in front of everyone. Jane felt angry. She wanted to protest, but she stayed silent, remembering her small size and lack of power. Helen whispered to her, "Jane, sometimes patience and forgiveness are stronger than anger. Endure, and you will grow stronger." As months passed, Jane learned to read, write, and study many subjects. She loved learning and found happiness in her books. She also grew physically stronger. The cold, hard life made her body healthy, even if the rules were harsh. Lowood was not only harsh, it could also be kind. One teacher, Miss Temple, was gentle and fair. She treated the girls with respect and helped them when they were ill. Jane admired Miss Temple and felt hope in her presence. Tragedy struck when Helen Burns became very sick. Her cough grew worse each day, and she became weaker. Jane stayed by her friend's side, bringing her small comforts. But despite care and attention, Helen died quietly one morning. Jane was heartbroken. She cried for her friend and felt the deep loss of someone who had been her guide. After Helen's death, Jane felt more alone but also more determined. She understood that life could be cruel, but she could survive and remain true to herself. Miss Temple encouraged her, telling Jane that education and courage could give her freedom and purpose. By the time Jane was older, she became a teacher at Lowood. She taught the younger girls and helped them find strength, just as Helen and Miss Temple had helped her. The school had changed slightly, conditions improved, and the girls were treated better, but life was still difficult. Still, Jane had grown. She was no longer a frightened, lonely child. She was clever, brave, and ready to face new challenges. She often thought of the world beyond Lowood and dreamed of adventure, love, and independence. And so, the years at Lowood prepared Jane Eyre for the next stage of her life. She had learned patience, courage, and loyalty. She had faced hardship, and now she was ready to leave the school and enter the larger, mysterious world outside. After many years at Lowood School, Jane Eyre decided it was time to leave. She wanted to find work and be independent. She found a position as a governess, a teacher for children, at a large, mysterious house called Thornfield Hall. The house was big and old, with tall windows and stone walls. It sat on a hill surrounded by trees, and a long driveway led to the front door. Jane felt nervous but excited. She hoped Thornfield would be a place of safety and new beginnings. When she arrived, she was greeted by Mrs. Fairfax, the housekeeper. Mrs. Fairfax was kind and calm. She showed Jane around the house and introduced her to Adele, the young French girl Jane would teach. Adele was lively, curious, and sometimes mischievous. She spoke some English, but Jane helped her learn more each day. Jane began her work immediately. She taught Adele reading, writing, and arithmetic. She also tried to be a kind friend. Though her new life was peaceful, Jane often felt the house was strange. At night, she sometimes heard mysterious laughter or footsteps in empty rooms. She asked Mrs. Fairfax about it, but the housekeeper only smiled mysteriously. One evening, Jane was walking in the garden when she first saw Mr. Rochester. He was tall, dark, and serious, with strong features and intense eyes. He was riding a horse, and the wind blew through his hair. Jane felt nervous but also curious. Who was this man who seemed both strict and kind? Mr. Rochester spoke sharply at first. "Who are you, and why are you here?" he asked. "I am Jane Eyre, your new governess," she replied politely. He studied her for a moment and then nodded. "Very well. I hope you are capable. Thornfield can be complicated." Over the following weeks, Jane settled into her life at Thornfield. She taught Adele during the day and explored the gardens and halls during her free time. She discovered secret passages, dark corridors, and old portraits on the walls. The house felt alive with secrets and shadows, and Jane often wondered who lived in every corner. One night, a strange sound woke Jane. She heard a loud laugh in the hallway, a sound that was not human, or at least it did not seem so. Heart pounding, Jane followed the sound, but found only empty rooms. The mystery filled her with both fear and curiosity. She could not understand it, but she felt a strange pull toward Thornfield's secrets. Another event shook her. Jane found Mr. Rochester in his room, injured. A fire had started and he had tried to put it out. Jane did not hesitate. She helped him, putting out the flames and carrying him to safety. Her courage impressed Mr. Rochester. For the first time, he spoke kindly to her. "Miss Eyre, you are brave and clever. I should be grateful to you." Jane felt her heart beat faster. She was not used to receiving praise from such a strong, proud man. Days passed, and Jane noticed a growing friendship between herself and Mr. Rochester. They talked about many things: books, life, and the world outside Thornfield. She respected him, and he respected her intelligence and honesty. Yet she also felt there were hidden parts of his life she could not understand. At night, the mysterious laughter continued. Jane could not ignore it. Who or what was in the house? She sometimes thought of the strange, dark attic rooms and wondered if Thornfield held more secrets than she could imagine. Despite the mysteries, Jane found peace in her work and simple routines. She taught Adele, walked in the gardens, and helped Mr. Rochester when he needed her. She felt proud of her independence and courage. Thornfield was a strange place, but it was also a home. And in that home, Jane Eyre felt that her life was changing, slowly, quietly, but surely. She could not know that Thornfield held great secrets, danger, and love, all waiting for her in the months to come. Life at Thornfield Hall continued, but Jane Eyre began to notice more strange events. The mysterious laughter and odd noises in the house puzzled her. Still, she focused on her work with Adele, teaching her reading, writing, and manners. Jane loved her job, but she also grew curious about the secrets Thornfield seemed to hold. Over time, Jane and Mr. Rochester grew closer. He spoke more openly with her, asking her opinions and listening to her thoughts. Jane admired his intelligence, courage, and honesty. She also noticed his dark eyes, which seemed to carry sadness. Sometimes he smiled warmly, and Jane felt her heart beat faster. One evening, while walking in the garden, Mr. Rochester asked Jane about her life. "Tell me, Miss Eyre," he said, "why are you so strong, yet so quiet? How did you survive your childhood?" Jane told him briefly about Gateshead and Lowood School, trying to be honest but not too sad. Mr. Rochester listened carefully and nodded. "You are brave, Jane," he said softly. "Few people would endure so much without giving up." Their friendship slowly became more than friendship. Jane felt happy when she was near him, and Mr. Rochester often sought her company. But the house's strange noises reminded Jane that Thornfield was not ordinary. She often wondered if danger or secrets were hiding in the shadows. One stormy night, Jane heard a scream from Mr. Rochester's room. She ran immediately. When she arrived, she found him awake, standing near the fire, his clothes slightly burned. A small accident had started a fire, but Jane acted quickly. She threw water on the flames and helped him. "You saved me again, Jane," Mr. Rochester said with a rare smile. "I do not know how to thank you." Jane blushed but smiled quietly. She felt proud that she had helped. In the following weeks, Jane and Mr. Rochester spent more time together. They talked, walked in the gardens, and shared small jokes. Jane realized she was falling in love with him. She admired his strength and kindness, but she also noticed his temper and mysterious sadness. Then came a shocking event. Jane and Mr. Rochester were to be married, but on the day of the wedding, a terrible secret was revealed. At the church, a lawyer told everyone that Mr. Rochester was already married. His wife, Bertha Mason, was alive and living in Thornfield, hidden from the world. She was ill and violent, and Thornfield had been keeping her a secret. Jane was heartbroken. She could not believe it. She had trusted Mr. Rochester and loved him. Now she understood that she could never be his wife. She felt pain, anger, and confusion, but she also knew she must leave Thornfield. Mr. Rochester tried to explain, but the law would not allow their marriage. Jane stayed calm. She knew she must be true to herself and her principles. That night, she quietly packed her belongings. She left Thornfield in the dark with only a small bag and her courage. The journey away from Thornfield was frightening. Jane walked alone, hungry and tired, through the cold night. She thought about the life she had dreamed of, the love she had felt, and the house she had left behind. But she also knew she could survive. She had survived Gateshead and Lowood. She could survive now. During her long walk, Jane realized that leaving Thornfield was not just an ending, it was a beginning. She did not yet know where life would take her, but she promised herself that she would remain strong, honest, and independent. And so Jane Eyre left Thornfield Hall, leaving behind love, mystery, and heartbreak. Her path was uncertain, but she carried courage and hope in her heart. After leaving Thornfield Hall, Jane Eyre walked alone through the countryside. She was cold, hungry, and tired. She did not know where she would go, but she felt she had no choice. She needed to be free and honest with herself. Jane walked for many miles, and her small bag of belongings grew heavier with each step. She slept in fields, under trees, and sometimes in barns. She worried about wild animals and the cold night air. But she also felt strong. She had survived terrible times before, at Gateshead and Lowood, and she knew she could survive again. One evening, Jane arrived at a small village. Her strength was almost gone, and she sat by a stream to rest. A kind woman saw her and invited her to her home. Jane was too weak to refuse. The woman gave her food and a warm place to sleep. Jane felt grateful. Soon, she discovered that she was near the home of St. John Rivers and his sisters, Diana and Mary. They welcomed Jane kindly. She stayed with them, recovering her strength. Jane learned that the Rivers were distant relatives of her father, whom she had never known. She was surprised to find family she had never met before. Jane began to work quietly. She taught the children, helped in the house, and spent her days reading and thinking. Life with the Rivers family was calm and peaceful. Jane felt safe and cared for. But she also remembered Thornfield and Mr. Rochester. Her heart still longed for him, even though she had left. St. John Rivers was a serious man. He believed in duty, religion, and discipline. He spoke to Jane about life and God, and he admired her intelligence and courage. Over time, he began to see Jane as someone he could rely on for a special purpose. One day, St. John made a surprising proposal. "Jane," he said, "I have an offer for you. I am going to be a missionary in India. I want you to come with me as my wife and companion. You will help me serve God and bring light to distant lands." Jane was shocked. She respected St. John, but her heart did not feel love for him. She could not marry a man she did not love, even for duty or adventure. She shook her head. "I cannot marry you, St. John. I respect you, but I do not love you. I could not be your wife." St. John was disappointed but understanding. He admired Jane's honesty and courage. He knew she must follow her heart, just as he followed his calling. During her time with the Rivers family, Jane also inherited some money from her uncle. She was now independent with her own means. She could make her own choices, travel, and live freely. This freedom gave Jane confidence and hope. But Jane could not forget Thornfield. She often thought of Mr. Rochester and wondered what had become of him. Her love for him had not disappeared, and her heart told her that their story was not yet finished. One night, Jane had a strange feeling. A voice in her heart, or perhaps a dream. She felt that Thornfield was in danger, or that Mr. Rochester needed her. She did not know how she would find him, but she knew she had to go back. Jane Eyre had left Thornfield in sorrow, but her journey was not over. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more independent. She had faced hardship, hunger, and loneliness. She had refused a life without love and followed her principles. And now she was ready to return to the house where her heart truly belonged. After many months with the Rivers family, Jane Eyre felt a strange pull in her heart. She could not stop thinking about Mr. Rochester and Thornfield Hall. Something told her that she must return. Her heart was full of hope and fear. Jane sold her small house and prepared for the journey. She packed her belongings carefully and said goodbye to St. John Rivers and his sisters. She thanked them for their kindness, love, and care. Jane felt grateful, but she knew her path was elsewhere. The road to Thornfield was long. Jane traveled by carriage and on foot, through fields, forests, and villages. Her mind raced with questions. What would she find at Thornfield? Would Mr. Rochester be there? Was the house still standing? When Jane finally arrived, she could hardly believe her eyes. Thornfield Hall was destroyed. Smoke and ash rose from the ruins. The roof had burned, and many walls were gone. Jane's heart sank. What had happened? She learned from the villagers that a terrible fire had broken out. It was caused by Bertha Mason, Mr. Rochester's wife, who had been living in the attic. She had set the house on fire. During the chaos, she fell to her death. Mr. Rochester had tried to save her, but the house was badly damaged. Jane hurried to find Mr. Rochester. She followed the directions of the villagers until she arrived at a small house nearby. There she saw him. He was older, and his face was changed. He had lost his sight in the fire, and one of his hands was injured. He could no longer see, and he could not live as he had before. "Jane!" he cried, his voice full of emotion. "Is it really you?" Jane ran to him and fell into his arms. "Yes, it is me," she said, her voice trembling. "I have come back." For a long time, they sat together. Jane cared for him, helping him with food, walking, and reading. She loved him more than ever, and he loved her. The hardships they had faced made their love stronger. Mr. Rochester was proud and brave, but now he was humble. Jane's presence gave him hope and happiness. He had lost his sight, but he had not lost his spirit. Together, they found comfort, laughter, and deep love. Over time, Jane and Mr. Rochester were married. Though he was blind, he could feel her love, and she could care for him with joy and devotion. Their happiness was simple, honest, and true. Thornfield Hall was gone, but their love created a new home in their hearts. Jane's journey had been long and difficult. She had faced cruelty, loss, hunger, and heartbreak. She resisted St. John's proposal, remained independent, and followed her principles. Now, she found the reward she had hoped for: love, companionship, and a life she chose herself. Years passed, and Jane and Mr. Rochester were happy together. He regained some comfort and learned to enjoy life again. Jane continued to teach and help others, sharing the lessons she had learned at Lowood and in her life. Jane Eyre's story is one of courage, honesty, and love. She survived hardships, followed her heart, and never gave up on what was right. Her life shows that even in a world full of cruelty and secrets, strength, kindness, and love can prevail. And so, Jane and Mr. Rochester lived together in peace, finding joy in their simple, loving life, a life earned through courage, honesty, and the power of the human heart. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe for more English stories.